Good morning, everybody, for the second, or for some of you, the third day of the conference. We had a great evening yesterday at the Chateau. Good food, good wine, good conversations. I think the ones that come to the morning sessions are the most interested and the best students, even though some of them are not here. I welcome you to the plenary session on energy in the digital world, shifting fundamentals of the energy business. My name is Christian von Hirschhausen. I accepted to take the chair, even though I'm of the 20th century and I still walk around with paper. I had the pleasure to be in contact with the three speakers, and we have a practitioner, we have a business school representative, and we have the economist engineer. So I don't want to give a long introduction because the topic is evident. We're going digital in all forms, and so I look forward to this. We'll have first the presentations and then open it up immediately for questions. Presentations will be about 15 to 20 minutes. And it's my pleasure to present Gasper Artak, local Slovenian professional with Petrol, who will give us an introduction to smart technologies and new business models. And thanks for being here. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, at the beginning, allow me just a few words about the Petrol Group. Petrol is the biggest energy company here in Slovenia. The vision for 2022 is a commitment to integrate energy, trade, mobility, and advanced services. Let me show you some Petrol's financial indicator from our strategy to 2018, from 2018 to 2022. As you may see, sale of petroleum will remain Petrol's core business, but it is decreasing with large steps because we are aware that we need to transform our company in the energy company of the future, and we are also aware of the environmental clean energy future. The main increase of Petrol's activities will be in electricity production from renewable energy sources, from environmental solutions, and from mobility. And why we are doing all this? Because world is changing. Energy company needs to transform if they wanted to be still competitive in the market. And let me just show you an example from the history. This was Fifth Avenue in New York City in 1900. Could anyone see the car in this picture? There are all horses and one car in that picture. Here it is. And 13 years later, only 13 years later, could anyone see the horse in that picture? Here it is, and it's even not like a horse. That means that only 30 years was needed to came from all horses to all cars. That means that energy transformation or technology transformation could happen really, really fast. Okay, there are 5 major trends in the energy sector: decarbonization of the energy production and mobility, deregulation, decentralization, digitalization, and electrification. And let me show you how that trends affect different technology development and how they are developing in different industries such as transport, energy, oil, and non-energy. Renewable energy sources are actually the fastest growing energy segment. From 2009 till 2070, solar and wind saw the biggest price declines. Right now, actually, onshore wind is the cheapest form of electricity production, both from clean and conventional. And that show us that investing to renewable energy sources is not just because it's a global trend, but because it's constantly improving and becoming more and more cost effective. This trend will actually continue. The agency Iaee estimate that the price of wind production will decrease by 12% in the next few years. Siemens estimated quite similar from 3 to 2 per year, percent per year. In last year, or in 2017, more was invested in solar than in all other technologies, low carbon technology. And what will be the results? The solar probably will be the cheapest source of energy in a decade. British Petroleum said that renewable energy sources will be the world's main source of electricity production. In a few decades, the share of renewables energy sources in the world will be around 30%. Right now, we are about 10%. In a region such as Europe, this number will be much more higher, around 40%. Okay, renewable energy sources represent disturbance to distribution networks. That means that large system batteries are being developed and to meet the needs of renewable energy sources. That means that efficient energy storage will be very important to compete and to put all these renewable sources in the system. When Tesla big farm went online, totally disturbed the market. That means that gas generation was unable to dictate the price of balancing cost anymore. Okay, transportation trends. I think there is a clear trend in transport industry, decarbonization and electrification. Companies almost competing with each other about prediction the future of electric vehicles. Volkswagen Group said that they are looking to become the world's leader when it came to electric vehicles. Their plan is to sell over 22 million of electric vehicles in the next decade. Also, Nissan Motor Group Corporation long-term goal is to reduce CO2. Their goal is that they will reduce CO2 from cars in 2050 for 90%. Also, Volvo said that in 2025, almost half of their cars will be electric. That means that in the future, there will be no Volvo without electric motor. Okay, the key influence on oil consumption and reduction of CO2 is played by public transport, electrical transport instead of electric vehicles. By the end of 2019, electric buses will have saved almost 100 million barrels of diesel. Of course, the leading country of this trend is China. China electric buses saves more than diesel than all electric cars combined. They actually adds London-sized electric buses fleet every 5 weeks. This is quite impressive. Europe is far, far behind of it. Okay, with advent of electric vehicles, car industry have entered a new power segment, which was previously reserved only for the energy companies, with new business models and new services. Car companies have started offering EV charging stations, services like vehicle-to-grid, electricity production from renewables, energy management system. They're entering to home, smart home application, and so on. And what does it mean if we replace all vehicles with electric ones? For example, in Slovenia, the motor fuel consumption in 2016 was 1.6 tons of motor fuel. Okay, if we convert this to electrical energy, that means approximate 19 terawatt hours, because electrical vehicles have approximately 4 times higher efficiency. That would mean approximately 5 terawatt hours of electrical energy per year. Of course, it would be only sense if we replace this, if we produce this energy from renewables. That would mean 1.5 terawatt of renewables energy sources. This is almost half of consumption, peak consumption in Slovenia. So that if we want to have electrical vehicles, we need to make some big changes in renewables production. Okay, the major trend in big energy companies is transformation into energy of the future companies. That means reducing of conventional resources and establishing of spin-off companies. Very known example is RWE and E.ON, where RWE became owner of whole portfolio of renewables, and main business of E.ON became retail, and they also have some conventional assets. Enel, Italy's largest company, Enel, decided that they will switch to renewables by 2050. And how they will do this? The solution lies in merging green power generation with digitalization. Enel works with Schneider Electric and achieving higher level of, allow them achieving higher level of control. That means that solar and wind production could be smoothly in place in the system. The results, almost 40% of Italy's energy right now is renewable. The major trend in oil companies is orientation to gas, electrification, and renewables. For example, Shell's new energy business was born in 2016. Since then, they have been investing, acquiring, and supporting cleaner energy program all over the world. The last, maybe not the last, but very known example is when Shell acquired a German battery startup, Sonnen. So they entered also to battery business. And what about electrical energy buyers? Major non-energy companies have made a commitment to go 100% renewables by 2050 at the latest. Some of them already achieved this goal, like Lego, Google, and so on. And also the report from Bloomberg shows that in 2018, 7.2 gigawatt clean of energy was bought. And because of all these new business cases will come, microgrids and energy communities have been identified as a key component of the renewables energy transition, from improving power reliability and quality and increasing system energy efficiency. In Europe, Netherlands is very active on this field. One example is site system in Netherlands. This is actually state-of-the-art microgrid pilot project that focused on sustainability, self-sufficiency, and energy management. So far, we've looked about the trends in the energy sector and how different companies around the world are dealing with the changes. I think that direction is quite clear: electrification and renewable energy sources. Now I would like to show you what Petrol is doing and how we are transforming our company. The mission of the Petrol is to improve quality of life. We believe in environmental friendly energy future, therefore we are very active on the fields of energy solutions, e-mobility, renewable energy sources production, and integrated solutions. Petrol has developed smart solutions which are implemented in more than 60 cities in the region. These projects are smart city projects and are focused on energy efficiency and cost and energy optimization of the system, such as smart district heating system, smart water supply system, smart building, and smart public lighting. As you may see, we are presented almost in all countries in the region, also in Italy and Austria, and we are also moving towards Russia. At e-mobility, Petrol's focus is building our own EV charging infrastructure and mobility services. That means we want to continue marketing car as a service, for example, corporate vehicle sharing or a taxi. We have built an extensive network of EV charging points. In Slovenia, we have more than 50 charging points located in the cities and 34 on highways. And we are also moving to, as I said, to Croatia and Italy. Petrol participating also in 3 international projects, Nexte, Urbani, and Multi-E. The common points for all those projects are non-discriminatory EV charging network, ultra-fast charging hubs, and new businesses in the field of e-mobility. As I said, we are aware of importance of renewable energy sources. As you have seen, there is a clear trend of for buyers who wants to buy 100% renewables, and also the wind production is becoming very cheap. Therefore, we are invested in several renewables projects. For example, wind power plant park in Croatia and some hydropower plants in Bosnia. And here are some ongoing projects. Right now, we are building 11 megawatts solar power plant and 30 megawatts wind power plant in Croatia and 100 megawatt wind power plant in Serbia. Okay, with an increasing number of distributed renewables, definitely new challenges are going to are emerging on the electricity network. Network stability is becoming more and more challengeable. Therefore, we believe that flexibility management will play an important role on this. That's why we are managed and improving, continuously improving virtual power plant, which enables us to manage distributed generation and active demand resources. And we are also very active in smart solutions projects such as smart grid, smart city, home energy management systems, and energy communities. This is also reason why we participate in 2 European Horizon 2020 projects in the field of integrated energy solutions. First is Compile, which main aim is building an energy communities, and the second one is XFlex, where we want to manage all the distributed flexible resources and put them on the market. Now, I would like to show you a short video. The video has English subtitles. I hope we will see it okay. The video is about the project Compile, when actually the first renewable energy sources community in Slovenia will be established. This community will be in village Luce, and this community actually will cover all needs of electricity demand from renewable energy sources. Okay.
Dobrodošli v Compile, evropski projekt s ciljem
Okay. And as you have seen, energy sector is definitely transforming, and this is where we are in 2019. My belief is that we will see a great transformation of the energy and mobile sector in the next decade, and it is an exciting time as it will actually enable us to make significant progress to improve the quality of life as a global community. For the longest time, the big oil and coal company will dominate in the energy sector, but well, until they won't anymore. Thank you.
I invite questions, comments at this point. None?
So for this panel, we have seen.
Could Toby stand up so that everybody understands the question?
Okay, so for this panel, we have seen in the video. Do you have some regulatory sandbox there, or is it already within the existing regulations where you are acting?
Actually, in Slovenia, there is an existing regulation regarding energy communities, but not supporting totally what we are doing. So we are work very in close with our agency, energy agency, to propose new regulatory framework.
I would have a question that was already raised yesterday with respect, sometimes it's 3D, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5, deregulation. I see this merger between RWE and E.ON relatively skeptical because they go in the other direction of deregulation. They go towards monopolies. RWE production, E.ON distribution. That's what we, Turaj, myself, Michael, fought for 20 years, and now it's coming back. How do you share the skepticism, or do you think that's thinking of the 20th century?
Okay, maybe I'm not the right person to talk about this. This was definitely political decision, but in my personal way, okay, we still have two companies. Only portfolio and focus of each company changed. Maybe we can call it monopoly, but I think in Europe are much more companies, so we can't. In Germany, maybe could be monopoly, but in Europe as a whole, in my opinion, no.
Okay, let's agree to disagree here. Yeah. And thank you very much for this interesting presentation.
Thank you.
So can I invite the next speaker, Christoph Burger, who comes from ESMT, European School for Management and Technology, Berlin. Christoph has a very distinguished career, both as a teacher and in education, but also as a researcher. And together with his colleague Jens Weinmann, he's always on the forefront of things. So he writes about things that we publish on a couple of years later. And he also has this book that I'm very interested in that he will summarize here. So thank you very much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christian, for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here in Ljubljana. I've been here once, and I love that city. It's a wonderful historical city. We strolled around. It's a great place to be. The first question, who of you know ESMT? Only some insiders, right? 5 people. ESMT, so I have one chart of who we are. ESMT is a business school that was founded 15 years ago in 2002 by the German industry. So it was a completely disruptive event because they gave the money to completely new university. And you can see here, we have a foundation that is headed by Dieter Zetsche. And we do what business schools do. So we do research, we do degree programs, and we do executive education. And 3 years ago, we became number 8 in the world in Financial Times ranking. Now we are number 12 in the world. So we are a so-called hidden champion in Germany, right? Nobody knows, but we are trying to do some good things. And as you can see here, we also have some energy companies in our founders. And that's why my dear colleague Jens Weimann and I, we focus on energy issues. So in 2013, we wrote a book about the decentralized energy revolution that was in Germany. And now this is the work we just finished. So it went under peer review, and now it's at the publisher. So that will come up. It's a decentralized energy, a global game changer, where we have a global perspective on the trend of decentralization. One, in terms of business model innovation, but also in terms of governance, where we looked at different countries and how they deal with that. And it will be for free, yeah? So you go to Ubiquity Press, you download, and you can use it for your teaching, for your research, for whatever. When Christian invited me to have this talk, I thought let's have 2 questions I like to focus on a little bit. So what drives digitalization in the energy world? What is the reasons why we have digitalization right here as a topic? And this is only a short teaser. And in the second part, I would like to shed some light on the role of big data, AI, blockchain, and cybersecurity, on the potential, but also on the hurdles, yeah? Because you hear about all this potential, and then when you try to do it, then it doesn't work, and why doesn't it work, and so on, yeah? And what are the hurdles? So let's start with that. Let's start with the digitalization. And I usually start with the case of Germany, because Germany started the Energiewende in 1990, so and I have a very short overview of what happened in Germany. So this is the energy value chain as we know it. So we have primary fuels, we have large-scale generation, trading, transmission, distribution, retail. Finally, the electricity hits the final customer. Then the first thing what we saw is large-scale generation of renewables. And that actually is no different business model. It's simply a new technology, right? So life goes on as usual, but instead of a coal-fired power plant, I have a wind farm. I need a new technician because I don't know the wind technology, and that's it. But then we also saw these prosumers with, these days, micro CHPs or PV, and they started storing the electricity, and then they had to be connected to the distribution grid, and the distribution system owners were very angry about that because they didn't know how to deal with it. Yes, then the whole distribution grid became unreliable and stuff like that. They didn't know how to cruise it, and so on. And then we also had a segment developing that was basically trying to reduce the electricity market. So demand response, performance contracting, and so on. So not growing the market, but how can we try to get rid of the market? So that was the part on the value chain. Then what happened to the competitive landscape? We had the liberalization, and then everybody thought Germany is a great market, so let's hit the German market. So all the incumbents from the other countries entered the German market, whether it's French, the UK, the Russians, and they all entered there. In the downstream innovation part, we saw all the hidden champions in Germany who were great in electrical appliances, energy appliances. They said, this is great, this is a boom in the downstream market, we enter it here. And then we had here on the demand response and performance contracting some outsiders, like, for example, Kofler Energies. Kofler is a billionaire from pay TV, and he said, well, let's do energy contracting on a subscription basis. So let's enter that market. And last but not least, we had all the ICT companies saying, if the grid has to be smart now, this is a great thing. It's even better than the internet. Now we have to do much more things. What I would like to point out is now we have a mess, right? So 15 years ago, we had a very nice market. It was all regulated. We do all this kind of thing. Now we have a mess. And the question is, can digitalization help us within that mess? And I would like to point one thing. Is in most of the talks that I'm listening to, the people say renewables is the disruption. In my mind, renewables is not the disruption. In my mind, the disruption is that the consumer can produce its own electricity and energy. And this is turning the business model upside down. If I have large-scale renewable, it's like the world before, no problem whatsoever. Yeah, we just feed it in, that's it. But of course, most of the decentralized energy generation is connected to renewable. So renewable is an enabler for me to have my own electricity generated or have community-based networks. So now what is the role of digitalization within that mess, right? How can it help? And let's start with, no, first of all, yeah, here. What do we see in the market is, of course, now the investments for digitalization are booming. Of course, yeah, because I have to deal with that mess, and now I have to see how can I connect all these elements. So we see electricity system software, we see management software, we see EV chargers and all these kind of things. And what it is used for, well, you can see here there are different applications and barriers to digitalization. One is smart thermostats, and that's a no-brainer right now, right? They are integrated in many things, and you see here many different applications. But you see also from Plenary, they did a nice study, and they say basically the future of electricity is that you don't own the assets anymore, you simply coordinate the cooperation with the assets. Like Uber is coordinating the assets, private assets of the cars, and Spotify and so on, the assets of music and so on. Yeah? So the network, the platform model. Okay? So that's where they are heading to. Now let's have a look at the role of the big data, AI, blockchain, cybersecurity, and so on. Let's start with AI. So AI is creating opportunities for new service models, right? Because we have this big data, we can analyze the big data, we can try to find out trends, and then hopefully either it reduces costs, or it increases revenues, or it saves some process steps, and that's it. If it doesn't comply to those objectives, then there is no need. Let's have a look at here. So one application is drones and insect-sized robots that identify detects, right? So that's easy because then you save some big assets or human capital that has to go there and has to check. We have smart wires that combine machine learning to enable real-time power dispatching. That's also very nice. We have machine learning enabled forecasting that anticipates, we know that already, so that's a good thing to do. We have sensors and machine learning to allow for by-the-minute adjustments to maintenance generation efficiently, or we have smart meter data and machine learning enables utility to offer services based on usage. So this is great. This is where basically AI can automate some stuff or can detect information for us to do the right decisions. We also have AI helping humans. So here you would say few technicians remain, but they spend more time in problem solving. Yeah, so sometimes in the old days, if you have operations and maintenance, then there were 3 artisans going there, one standing in front of it, the other one's trying to detect whatever the errors are. Nowadays you have one with a potential virtual camera. The camera is transmitted to the headquarter and the center, and there you have the data scientist and saying, well, you should look at this, you should look at this, you should look at this. That might be the detection, that might be a problem, and so on. And then basically you have more or less an application technology job on site, and you have a highly statistical knowledge job in the headquarter where you try to combine the data. You have field workers that receives real-time updates to decrease response times. Or you have here virtual agents automate call centers and automatically segment consumers based on service history. You know the bots right now, right? Not only electricity, but also if you do health. There's a health app, it's called, where you can basically try to detect your own health problems, and within 10 questions, they know what is the diagnosis, and then you can go to the physician and you ask for that. So similar here in the electricity market. So a lot of potential, but now where are the hurdles? We did some interview with Reza, and Reza is the founder of Envio. And Envio's system is leveraging the Internet of Things for a low-cost alternative in terms of building efficiency, right? So we have the Siemens, Schneider Electric, Johnson Controls that focus on the big buildings, and Reza wanted to focus on the smaller buildings. The promise is that basically those competitors, he said, the installation costs 240k euro. He says, I can do it for 60k euro. He has these cubes, so the cubes are in there. And one additional feature of the cubes is that basically the cube also senses CO2 emissions. And why do you need CO2 emissions? If I know the CO2, I know how many people are in the room. Yeah? And then with that, I can regulate the temperature, the light, and so on. Yeah? So he is using then the data collection also to steer the buildings. And how does he try to do it? Well, first of all, he says basically we need it for device recognition. Yeah, you can imagine that in these old buildings there are so many devices and you don't have a clue of what kind of devices are in there, whether you can find them, what is the replacement system and so on. So basically he uses artificial intelligence to check what kind of appliances are in this building. Secondly, of course, he tries to use them for predictive maintenance, yeah, instead of letting the system go bust, trying to see, well, now we have to exchange that appliance. But he says basically on artificial intelligence, whenever it comes to a critical application, we do not trust it. Yeah, because there might be bugs in there, and then the temperature of the heating is up to 30 degrees, so there is still human control. There is still human control, as I said in the previous chart, where you have operation and maintenance. There's one technician on site, and then there is a human control using statistics, using data, but helping to support the person on the site. Yeah. So a lot of potential, but still you would have people to be able to monitor the artificial intelligence and ensuring that these are the right decisions. A second thing is blockchain. And who of you know the technology of blockchain? Okay, 50-50. Let me quickly try to introduce the technology. We had the year 2008, and in the year 2008, there was the financial crisis, right? In Germany, Angela Merkel told us, no problem, you don't have to worry about your banking account. If it's up to 100,000, you will get the 100,000 euros. Above 100,000 euros, I'm so sorry. Yeah? So now, you have the bank at one computer, you have your money at one computer at a bank. At the same year, in 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto came and said, now we do banking without a bank. So we simply use a decentralized network. So we agree that we now have the Ljubljana token, and we agree that we all participate in here with our public identity. And then whenever one computer goes bust, we don't have to worry because we keep the records on all of our computers. So if one bank goes bust, one of you goes bust, no problem. I can check at his computer whether I still have my 150,000 euros and I can retrain those 150,000 euros. Yeah? And then we agree that if the majority says, yes, this transaction is true because I can check at his account whether he has the money to send it to me, then we say, yes, this is the right transaction. So basically, the point is it's a higher security because I don't have any one computer of a bank, but I have many computers. So it's easily retrievable. And it's more robust because I have a decentralized of the risk. Okay? And within the 80-block project, that's a project funded by the German government, we did some quantitative interviews of how executives see the application of this technology for the energy markets, and also some qualitative interviews on how could the business model be behind that new technology to deal with this complexity in the energy markets. And here, this is the quantitative study which took place here in 2019. And we did an old one that you can see here in Germany in 2016. There, the respondents came only from Germany. At this poll, they came across the world. Yeah, so this is Germany, and then this is 2019. And 2019, you have all responses. You have USA, Australia, and you have Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. When you look at it, the game changer, so about more than 70% see blockchain as a game changer or further dissemination likely. So they think that basically with this technology, you can at least tackle a few problems of this digital world in the energy markets. Yeah? And let's have a look at where do they see the potential. They see the potential here either in process optimization, and I give you examples later on. So here, process optimization, where you basically try to cut out the intermediary, so the margin of the intermediary is redistributed to the producers or the consumers. Yeah? Or in the other way, they start saying the application of the technology is in trying to create platforms. So platforms where basically the transaction, the administration, execution of the deal is done on the blockchain. And each different business model is like an app and you agree to buy the app, and it's transacted via the transaction blockchain technology. So you could also think of that like it's an outsourced administration department. Yeah, instead of having your admission office, your operating office, now you have this kind of system. We did interviews how the business models might look like, and we did that with a developer of an energy trading app. We did it with a multinational IT and software company and a multinational IT company. We did it with a provider of financial services, because sometimes the finance sector is a little bit ahead of the energy sector, especially in blockchain applications, because Satoshi Nakamoto was first, then the Ethereum came later. And then we have a provider of an energy-specific blockchain trading platform. Yeah? And we did qualitative structured interviews, and these are the results. I highlighted 3 of them. One is that is the developer of an energy trading app. So the application here is like a process optimization. Yeah? And basically, so these were the headings of the interview. The value proposition is that basically they achieved 90% cost reduction because they simply took out the broker. Yeah? So 90% cost reduction, that's easy. What is the blockchain usage? Because the people think that we have to regulate the blockchain application. And here, no regulation necessary whatsoever, because blockchain is simply used as a communication channel so that you know what is the supply and demand. And then I call you, we do the deal, that's it. Yeah, so the data aggregation function of the broker is gone to a communication system of the blockchain, period. Easy as this, no regulatory hurdles, nothing, simply let's do it. Now, what are the hurdles? He says, well, from a technical, there's a technical pain point, because if you have the data on the blockchain, it takes some time, right, until we agree our majority vote. So there's latency. So if you want to have micro trading in seconds, blockchain is the wrong technology. If you do wholesale trading and you have some time for 5 minutes so that the market is cleared, then it's no problem. Then you can apply blockchain technology. Yeah. The other one is also fail to track liquidity, because now you have a process, and ideally you would like to have a platform for the wholesale trading. But if you want to have a platform of the wholesale trading, I need to have the liquidity of the market. So I compete against the current competitors. And of course, they are also clever people, so they might want also their own blockchain solutions, but then driving down their own margin, right? So they have to cannibalize themselves. Yeah. So, and if now, and this is the other hurdle now, if they would use the blockchain to do the deals, then they would need to become a multilateral trading facility, and that would kill the whole business model. Yeah, because then each one who has the computer has to apply for that license, and this is thick like this, and you are gone, all right? Okay, financing, it's easy, it's a subscription fee. Yeah, and then you have some deals per fee. So that's the trading app. Now I have 2 others that I wanted to highlight, and this is one, this multinational IT hardware and software company versus the provider of an energy-specific blockchain trading platform. Now, value proposition. Here is they offer 3 different products. One is the first dimension is join, so they have already platforms for different industries, for food, for energy, and so on, where you simply can join. The second is that they coordinate, so you are a bunch of people and want to set up a new blockchain platform, and then they coordinate you and set up the platform, or they want to build, so build your own. Now the blockchain usage is here for trust, security, speed, and acceleration. But the point here is, at this one, this is a pure IT system. There is no token involved whatsoever. Yeah, it's simply you have an IT provider, and the IT provider uses some cloud services. Now the IT provider uses a blockchain, and within the blockchain you have transparency of the data, and based on that data you do your business as today. Yeah, but you have more transparency and you have trust in the data, and then basically whatever you do there is integrated in your operational software system. So there are no additional interfaces whatsoever. Yeah? But now you have a provider offering you a software solution for your company that is dealing with that blockchain-based platform. It's a permissioned blockchain platform, so you know all the players inside. No additional risks, no tokenization whatsoever, easy, can start doing it right now. Yeah? And now here's the more disruptive part. This is the provider of an energy-specific blockchain trading platform. They also want to set up a platform, and it's a little bit like the Linux model. So basically you have a non-for-profit basic platform where all the technology is for free, and then you add up value-added services where you need an additional license and you are tailor-made. Yeah? And here, they use the blockchain as little as possible, only for the coordination of rights and ownership of assets. Yeah, why? Because now they use a public blockchain, they use Ethereum, because if you put it on the public blockchain, then it's time-consuming, it's costly, so therefore only the biggest assets you put on there to allow for transparency. All the other nitty-gritty stuff you do in your permissioned platform, and you can scale it there much better. What do they have? They have a privacy issue, because if it's an open platform, then everybody can join, and the question is, how do you control those who join? Which kind of rights do you give those no-names into your platforms? So you can also do some hierarchical access on those. And last but not least, of course, here you would argue, because they offer a token, there's an economic incentive besides cost reduction, like with the IT provider. There you have simply cost reduction, right? Here there's an incentive of tokenization, so if this becomes the network of the future, then you have some Uber of the future. Here you give the Uber of the future to the IT company offering that service. Yeah? Okay. Last but not least, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, I looked it up a little bit, sources of cyber attacks, so the hacking market is booming. A few years ago, there was only the US and Russia and China, and now you find them in Africa, wherever there are some smart hackers, and they say, this is a great market, let's enter it. And here you see the sources of cyber attacks, so it's scrolling around the world. Basically, what are the business models? It's industrial espionage. So for example, there was one case basically where the hacker said in a southern German company, basically either you pay me or I increase the temperature of your batch, and then your batch you can throw away from your production site, so you better pay. Yeah? As easy like that. I'm sitting wherever I'm sitting, you transfer the money, I'm a happy man. Blackmailing, or last but not least, influencing in M&A businesses. And this is getting more and more serious, and we have some clients where we said, oh, this is the topic of the future. And the client said, no, 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 this is not the topic of the future, it's the topic right now. Yeah, so we deal with that all the days, yeah, and this is highest priority right now, and it's getting more and more, unfortunately, more and more sophisticated. So you need to ramp up to be able to deal with that. Now, what is the linkage to the energy markets? Well, one is, here's a study by KPMG, so they claim that basically blockchain can have a strong concept for secure transactions, and you can see here that the majority agrees to that, but also the majority says that basically blockchain issue causes might bring new security risks to an organization. So how do you apply those technology? So that's one part. The other part is we wrote up some interviews on Event Horizon in 2018, where there was a panel on cybersecurity. And the biggest issue in the energy market on the cybersecurity is the old-fashioned smart meter infrastructure. There are no cybersecurity hurdles whatsoever. Yeah, you simply enter the meter, and then from there you can do whatever you want. Yeah, whereas our computer, there you have your software, and then you need to do the updates. The smart meter at your home is old-fashioned, doesn't have any updates, it's easy. If you connect it, the hackers love it, they get in, and here we go. A nice business market. So I'm at the end of the talk. Let's start a little bit a summary. So the idea was, what drives digitalization? We do see the value chain is turned upside down. There are many competitors coming in, and the idea is that with the digitalization, you might want to be able to deal with that complexity. Yes, and you focus on better performance, new networks in the light of the new energy world. If we look at AI, that's creating a lot of opportunities, but there's still, you need control by humans right now. If you look at blockchain, yes, might be a great thing for some applications. And there the question is you can apply it directly, either as a communication or an IT service. And this is cost cutting. This is not such a disruption, but you can also apply it with tokenization, and that will be interesting how the society will deal with that. And last but not least, cybersecurity is no more a topic of the future, but a topic of today. So thank you very much. I'm happy, looking forward to your answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph. This was a brilliant overview. I think Jean-Michel shares this opinion.
So the best presentation I have seen since 2-3 years, so I'm really amazed and I deeply congratulate and I'm waiting for the book. Could you go just a step ahead and tell us, do you expect new entrepreneurs, new companies, new businesses to be the key persons, or established players having enough resources to buy the ideas and the new things and to develop them at the right big scale?
And the answer is both. I think let's have a look. If we look at the German energy companies, they suffered a lot. Yeah, and when I had talks to Spain, the Spaniards asked me, why did you destroy those great companies? Yeah, and hello, yeah. So they had to suffer a lot, and you asked the question with the monopolization, and he nicely said, in Germany maybe, in Europe not. And I also would say the point is, I think we will see a completely new competitive landscape. Some of them might be the incumbents, like E.ON with the retail market, but I'm pretty sure that there will be new incumbents on the network, and I'm pretty sure that it might be a coalition. It might be E.ON and IBM and whatever, yeah? The coalition is a cartel. It's a cartel, yeah. And no, that's right. No, I think,
maybe okay.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think it's in that way, it's really important to have the look at these platform economics and to look at that these are aligned with market forces. So that I think is the big topic, yeah? And I see runner-ups, and I would say one disruption newcomer from the blockchain world will be also in there. I have no idea which one, yeah? Other questions? I come to you.
Good morning. My name is Florian Weiss from the Berlin University of Technology. I have a question relating to the business model with hosting the blockchain from a cloud. I mean, we have the blockchain located on different sites with clients and on a certain server. But if we have one server hosting that blockchain, don't we have a bottleneck relating the communication there, or is it also rather divided?
I completely agree, but these are IT companies, and the IT companies say that they are able to do that. And that's a little bit, I mean, if you look at the application of the technology and you would say, I give it in the hands of an IT company, then it's as usual, right? You get a little bit more transparency, yeah, because of the data that you didn't trust before. Now you can trust the data, that's cool. But all the value chain is still the same, yeah? And the question is, the spirit of blockchain is that you have a decentralized. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. But that I see, if you look at the application of that spirit, and I'm very curious how that will work out, I think that's a generation question. Yeah, because most of the people right now still want to have security in their trades. And they say, if that is in the established world, and I know the money is going there and money back and forth, so I trust that system. And to have a change that you trust now, a democratized system, is a kind of groovy thing, right? And I'm very curious how this will work out, yeah.
Over here. Good morning, my name is Kenneth van den Berg, researcher at KU Leuven in Belgium. I have a question on data availability. I would like to compare the energy sector to the banking sector, where recently you have European legislation forcing banks to make their data available to third parties, to develop apps, etc., like the open banking legislation. Do we need something similar in the energy sector? So in other words, is data availability a constraint in the trends that you describe, or you don't see it as a problem?
I think that's a very interesting. I think if I know correctly, I've been to the Danish TSO, and they told me that they have established a data marketplace. So it's free to use, but basically the usage is not so big right now. I still would argue that, yes, it might be good for the data. I'm unclear whether the data marketplace is integrated into the utility business model, or whether the data market is a market in itself. Yeah, and also if we look on the blockchain based, you own your own data, right? You could sell your own data. But here the question, a little bit what your question was, do I want to sell my own data? Or am I simply looking at a utility and say, okay, you use my own data, but I pay less? Yeah? I don't know. Yeah.
Do we have time for another question, or?
No.
I'm sorry.
No, we thank Christoph for this very inspiring presentations, and there's possibility to continue the discussion over coffee break and probably into the next session. Thank you very much, Christoph. And we come to Hans Auer, who joins us from Vienna University of Technology, the G Group, which is working on these topics for a long time. As a matter of fact, about 10 years ago, probably, Hans had this project on the optimal smartness of grids. Probably you can tell an anecdote what the optimal smartness was, and that was 10 years ago, probably 12 years ago. And so we look forward how this has evolved and about the competitiveness of different business models. Thanks, Hans.
Thank you, Christian. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to elaborate a little bit about the competitiveness or the profitability of different energy community concepts. So in my talk, after introducing, let's say, energy democracy and the ongoing developments in these days, I have more or less three major, let's say, chapters. First, I'll talk about the prosumer on the single-family house, so when there was grid parity already in the past, and what have been the implications of these insights. Then I'll go ahead to the multi-apartment building, where the system boundary is the multi-apartment building, which is defined, let's say, as an energy community. And then finally I go beyond the meter and talk about PV sharing concepts on a local energy community level, and elaborate a little bit on that and what's the optimal composition to maximize welfare within the community. And finally, of course, I'll talk about the implications for the electricity system itself, because now already and in the future, the prosumers, they do what they want, and the centralized system has to accept what finally will remain, and we have to serve finally the market. So when talking about ongoing developments, so we are observing actually increasing energy democracy. So it's a bottom-up development. We have the technologies available. We have the plug-and-play technologies, PV systems, battery systems, electric vehicles, and of course digitalization. We see local self-consumption, and we already see that the residual load looks quite different from year to year, not only in Europe, but also in the US, for instance, in California. In the last couple of years, so we see, let's say, the PV effect at noon and in the afternoon. And also we have strong policy support to implement these local energy communities. So in the winter package, the European Commission favors these kinds of concepts, and we in academia or in applied research in terms of modeling, so we have less experience. So we try to understand it, we try to model it, to quantify it, and also to help shaping the residual load also for our, let's say, traditional market models, for our fundamental market models. And as I already said, so there are challenges to the established top-down electricity market design. Of course, we have to further develop the existing market design. Our models and our markets models mainly work based on these kind of, let's say, assumptions, but usually we treat demand as some kind of a constraint. So we give little attention to understand demand, to understand residual loads. Of course, we model elasticities and to some extent flexibilities, but on very aggregated level. And let's say the proponents who argue that it's better to have a top-down, let's say, energy planning is that we have economies of scale, cost efficiency, utilization rates are better, and so on. So in my opinion, at present we are on the edge in these days where two philosophies, where they meet or where they are even colliding, so also in academia. On the one hand, it's, let's say, the top-down energy planners. Of course, we are talking about the market, it's the energy market and the further development, and we need capacity mechanisms if we cannot sustain with the energy-only market and so on. So this is what I call, let's say, the top-down energy planners. This is a prolongation of the good old world versus, let's say, the energy Democrats. So the question is, are these dreamers, or is this, let's say, a serious development which will take off in the next couple of years? So when talking about energy communities, I'd like to go back to the year 2012. I'd like just to show two slides. In those days, we have been working on an EU project, and in selected European countries, we analyzed the competitiveness of PV self-consumption in single-family houses. And mainly, we developed a simple simulation model. It was a net present value exercise. And the main driving forces determining competitiveness have been, on the one hand, of course, the retail price, because for the end user in those days, the economic benchmark is the retail price and not the wholesale price. Then the system price of the PV system. Then for excess generation, let's say that the market price or the generation I get for feeding into the grid, and then, of course, also the energy shield in the different countries. And in those days, it was an optimization model, and we determined the optimal size of the PV system on the rooftop. And of course, it was not a 5 kilowatt peak size, it was a 2.5 kilowatt peak. But in those days already, for instance, in Germany, it has been already competitive. And in our consortium, there also was an association, a German association, and they asked us if we could not, let's say, deliver these kinds of results in Germany, because they made lobby in those days for the next round of feed-in tariffs. And I said, yeah, it's bad luck for you. We are a university, and we say what we have to say, and that's it. And here we see the result of this study in those days in 2012. So the yellow color simply means PV is competitive on the rooftop without any kind of support. We don't need a subsidy and so on. And in other countries, let's say the competitiveness came a few years later. But of course, it was not, let's say, a 5 kilowatt or 7 or 10 kilowatt peak system. It was a 2.5 kilowatt peak system. So this is a matter of fact that already in those days, somebody could say rooftop PV for a single prosumer household simply is competitive, and they are in the market. And they reach, let's say, up to 30% or so self-production and self-consumption, of course. So this was the past. So now, a couple of years ago, in a few countries, also Germany and also Austria, so we got legislation and also some regulatory sandboxes to further develop this energy community concept on a multi-apartment building level. So the system boundary is the multi-apartment building, But here, of course, also legislation and the regulations, they are different. So I show 3 different concepts here. Where somebody could understand what's the public grid, where the private grid enters, or where there is, let's say, a combination of a public and a private grid. So in Austria, we have the situation on the far right, but actually the private grid here is not owned by the public distribution grid company, but finally it's operated because they are the only one who have the license. But of course, here you could argue, okay, we have a combination of prosumers, but also consumers, because it always must work on a volunteer basis. There needs to be the degree of freedom that not every party is obliged to participate. And in addition, of course, there are many challenges when trying to implement a pilot like that. If you have common areas like the underground park and so on, then it depends whether or not, or if you have only one, let's say, interface or individual interfaces and so on, but I'd like to omit this kind of stuff. But this is the further development here, that you have a PV system on the rooftop, and then you can, let's say, cooperate among the units in this multi-apartment building, or you also can, let's say, only use a fraction of the PV system for your individual load. And we have made some nice studies in comparison also between Austria and Germany, mainly in terms of using the different retail electricity prices. So Germany actually has, in a European context, a skyrocketing retail electricity prices, also due to a high share of surcharges and so on, to promote renewables, or it was at least in the past. Austria also has rather a high retail price, but there is a gap. It's between, Austria has around 22 cents per kilowatt hour, and Germany 27, 28 or so. In this study, the data we used here. And here we see on the one hand, so our model optimizes here the optimal PV system size on the vertical axis. In this use case we use here, we use the 10 units. And here we have a weighting factor if the prosumers want to minimize the total cost or maximize self-consumption. So this is not that important to transport the main message. But we see if they want to, the comparison between Germany and Austria shows the blue line shows where on aggregated level the entire building load is used to optimize self-consumption on aggregated level, and the red colors, they show if each individual unit has a fraction of this PV system and each individual unit maximizes its own profitability. And we see in the first half of the cost minimization axis, so we install the maximum PV capacity which is available, but then in Austria we are going down, but in Germany we in almost all cases install the maximum capacity available, and there is also no difference in this case study whether or not the individual units maximize by their own or if they cooperate and maximize the aggregated building load with PV production. But here you see the differences whether or not the units within this building, whether they cooperate. We have further extended this kind of study, so I don't go into the details. It's a publication in Energy and Buildings. Then we argued, okay, at present these are operational models only, but we want to extend it not only to use rooftop PV, but also building integrated PV on the facades. And we also combined it with investment models, so that we first start retrofitting the building, that also the heat load will be reduced, and in case if it's a fossil heating system, we made sensitivity analysis for different alternative new heating systems, and of course in case if you have or if you install a heating pump, you have additional electricity loads and synergies. And here I show a result using, let's say, a heating pump and many different building configurations. I don't want to go into the details, but here on the left-hand side, again, we see for a use case of these 10 units the installed PV capacity, the optimal installed PV capacity, and the net present value of the total cost. So self-production, purchase from the grid. Yeah, more or less selling into the grid, we treat it, let's say, with €0, because our approach rather is to determine the optimal size and not to make, let's say, business with selling excess generation into the system, because this is, in our opinion, old-fashioned way, just arguing, okay, if I have excess generation, then I sell it and then I want to earn, let's say, some kind of money, because we see it's increasingly not needed exactly at that time when there is an excess generation. You have voltage problems and all this kind of stuff. In this case study, we see different colors. This is north, south, east, and west direction. We see that in this building, we have installations in the different cases in several directions, not only north-south or east-west. So it simply depends on the setup, on the building configuration, and these codes, they show different roof pitches, whether or not it's building attached and building integrated and so on. But we see we can use, let's say, the skin of the building as a potential to install PV wherever it will become, let's say, profitable. And this is what we think is one important aspect also for the future when trying to install, let's say, big shares of PV on building level. And here we see just one case, so it's the old building, it's the heat load of 160 kilowatt hours per square meter and year, and if we implement retrofitting, renovation, wall insulation and so on, and come to a building code to 60 kilowatt hours per square meter and year, and if we have a heating pump there, so this figure shows, on the one hand, the renovation cost we need for retrofitting, and on the other hand, here we see the cost savings if we have this energy community with the PV system and optimal PV sharing within this community. And this is the, let's say, the profitability gap, finally somebody could argue, which is needed as an incentive for retrofitting the building. So this could be, let's say, public money, and we have modeled it for different CO2 prices. So this here is the actually at present, so around 30 euros per ton CO2, and we went up to 80 and 160 euros per ton. And this means, so it would be possible to retrofit a multi-apartment building to bring it to this standard, and if you implement an optimal PV system on the skin and have an energy community, that you can do this without any, let's say, additional support or additional incentive. And this is what's very important. And present, so in the master thesis, we are working on 8 different contracting models where we really identify the different agents, who is responsible for what, who installs, who operates, who maintains the system, and this is supposed to be very important in the future to have this integrated approach again, and energy contracting might become competitive again. And finally, now coming to the energy community, so beyond the meter, so this is peer-to-peer trading. So this means that different prosumers, let's say at present, so in our simulation we have done here, and we are working here at present is simply on a distribution grid branch where different setups of prosumers simply try to maximize self-consumption within the community. So the objective function of the optimization model is to maximize welfare within this community, and this means to minimize, let's say, the cost for self-consumption and purchases from the grid. In addition, so it's a quarter of an hour model, in addition, we have introduced different willingnesses to pay. So this means that somebody who has, let's say that the lowest willingness to pay is the retail price. But if you want to be green, depending on the marginal emissions on the wholesale market price, somebody could be willing to pay 20 or 30 or 50% more. So this means, and here we have the 10 different prosumers, and here we see for this quarter of an hour the willingness to pay, depending also what's going on the wholesale market. And this means, so if I have a rooftop PV on my system and I have a low willingness to pay, so it's the retail price only. If I don't want to be in addition green, but another one has a higher willingness to pay because this prosumer wants to avoid CO2 emissions on the wholesale market, then my production on my rooftop is allocated to the other prosumer and not to myself. So this is the idea behind that. And here we see some results. So without battery storages, so the red lines, so this is self-consumption really on the rooftop of the individual prosumers, but these blue bars, they show the traded electricity. So from the rooftop of this one, it's mainly, let's say, transferred to this prosumer because there is a higher willingness to pay in this quarter of an hour. And with battery storage, we see again that the self-consumption of the individual prosumers again increases. So this means there is competition, yes, that there is competition between the battery system and sharing across the community. So here the aggregated results on annual level, so without prosumer and community level, of course 100% purchases are from the grid. Without battery systems, we have around 40% self-consumption here in the community, with and without training, and with battery storage, we have around 60% self-consumption, and this is very important. So the ultimate goal of energy communities is not to decouple from the grid and to be autarkic. So we still have in the optimal system 40% purchases from the grid. But the main issue is that the community can sustain without any kind of support. And then we do also some analysis on optimal composition for the community, so that there are also not only prosumers, but also consumers only can contribute. Of course, there are challenges, a lot of challenges. For the distribution grid operators, here we see if we increase the PV share on distribution grid level, and here we have the revenue of the DSO. So if self-consumption increases, so this gray area is missing. So this is the reduced revenue for the TSO. And in many countries, also Austria and Germany, we have the discussion to increase, let's say, the fixed charge again for the distribution grid business. Then you can compensate a little bit of these revenue losses. But it's clear that this is a challenge, and I expect that in the medium to long term will come, and I already come to the conclusion, we'll come to a situation where grid tariff design on distribution grid level will head towards fixed charges only. So this, of course, in the very short term now is a little bit a negative effect for the profitability of these PV concepts again. But if PV system costs decrease again, this might be no problem. And then these communities, they are fully in the market. So then you really can compete there. It's important, of course, to adapt regulations and not only allow some sandbox niches or regulations, but it's a matter of fact that they will emerge, and the potential is extremely high. So in Austria, we estimated a potential of 20 gigawatts, and we would need 12 gigawatt PV to reach 100% renewables on energy balances. So they will take off, unimpressed by the arguments, let's say, of the energy planners in terms of cost efficiency, economies of scale, utilization rates, and how we treat the residual load. But of course, resource adequacy questions for the system itself, for the centralized system, are very important. But this is not the topic right here, but maybe I can refer to a forthcoming paper here in the journal Economics of Energy and Environmental Policy, where Odom Pötterid and myself, we try to sort out all these questions, how to operate, let's say, the existing electricity market, that we can maintain resource adequacy. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paraman. You mentioned the grid cost issue with increased self-consumption. The grid cost, of course, or the revenues from the grid companies are reduced. What's your opinion? Is this way of thinking, you know, that this solution just simply increasing the fixed part of the, or fixed component of the grid tariff system and reducing the variable one, a suitable one? Is this the right direction, or shall we tackle this issue a little bit differently?
So I think it's the right issue. So as an electrical engineer, let's say by education, I need to argue, so the distribution grid needs to be, let's say, designed to manage the most critical hour throughout the year. And this will be maybe when there is no renewables in the system and so on. So it's not the kilowatt hours. The system design determines the distribution grid. It's the kilowatts, so installed capacity. And as an energy economist, I would argue in the past it was very important, let's say, to trigger some price elasticity, that we have, let's say, a per unit, let's say, kind of charging to reduce CO2 emissions and so on and so on. But in a renewable world, or in a 100% renewable world, I do not care about, let's say, some wasted kilowatt hours and some rebound effects, or like Reinhard said yesterday. So these few kilowatt hours in the residual load in terms of excess renewable generation, it's better simply to throw it away, to shed wind or PV and so on. In a renewable world, there are no externalities triggered if I have, let's say, a suboptimal price elasticity. So in that sense, I would argue we shall increase the fixed tariff.
What about going more towards locational dynamic pricing of tariffs, grid tariffs?
Yeah, you can add on that locational pricing, signaling the state of the PV of the distribution system. That you say, if you have over voltage, that you even try to reduce the distribution grid fee to incentivize consumption and so on. So you can add up, of course, something which is triggered based on the physical problems on the distribution grid. But the distribution grid charging itself, so I would argue, shall go towards more fixed tariff components. Because this also will support the renewables, because then they can argue we are fully in the market. There is no need to free ride again on, let's say, distribution grid charge components or something like that.
Any other questions at this point? I would have a question that we could have discussed in the panel, but now I ask it to you. With respect to the traditional business model, we heard one statement in favor kind of the status quo with some digitization. You had proposals for disruption. How do you see the business model of companies in this field, knowing that, for example, two of the companies that are in your book, Mobisol and Solar Kiosk, they went bankrupt since you wrote this book? So what does this imply for business models of the traditional companies?
Yeah, so we observe in our areas in Austria and in Vienna that the traditional companies, they try to be, let's say, the main contractor, for instance, in this kind of building integrated PV systems and community concepts. They at least want to, let's say, invest and somehow lead this development within the multi-apartment building. So in terms of community concepts beyond the meter, so I think this mainly will be based on, let's say, on an individual basis, or maybe also new market participants. So beyond the meter, I think it's more difficult for traditional companies and utilities, but at present it's mainly, let's say, or they mainly focus on multi-apartment building level, because here the system boundary is rather close, and they still can make their, let's say, some kind of businesses. But beyond the meter, it's difficult.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks to all the three speakers. Thanks for being here. Let's give our speakers a great applause.